Good afternoon, everyone. BC Richfield here, coming to you live from London. It's just got a couple of minutes past midday here, making it the same UTC. A really big shout out to everybody joining us live today for the regular Wednesday chart request show, which we're also combining with the continuation of our recovery program. If you don't know what that is, you can find some information down in the description or on the Birb Nest or on my Twitter profile, which you can find at the top of the screen at BC_Richfield. So we've opened up the Discord for 30 days for everybody that's struggling at the moment. You get access to all of the courses, all of the premium content, all of the calls, etc. So if that's of interest to you, please do go and check it out. And if not, we just wanted to share today's topic online as well, because it flows beautifully into the stream. When not to trade, how to understand your trading environment, good and bad, mostly obviously at the moment. If you're a bull, it's been a little bit on the downside, and how preserving your capital is very, very important. Unfortunately, in this game, if you look at things like crypto Twitter too much and other things, not saying there's not exceptional people on there, because there really is, but there's also a lot of trash. And working through all of that noise, it's really, really difficult. I understand it from my early days as well, where you just want to be involved in every pump. You want to follow every influencer's shill. And you just feel like you're getting caught on the sidelines. But the truth of it is, it's basically the opposite. You know, if you're feeling that FOMO, that fear of missing out, you're getting lured into the markets. That's exactly what they're designed to do. And to chew you up as a little bit of fuel, all right? So quick hello in the comments. Angela, great to have you back with us. Craigie boy, and ever present, and our wonderful Jojo as well. Guys, and when I say guys, I do mean ladies and gents and all you wonderful people. If you've got any tickers you would like me to take a look at, please pop it in the chat and I will take a look. Also got a new partner at TBN that I've been running the rule over recently, because I really like the sector. Like I say, very, very rare that I bring you anything that kind of gauges my interest. I've done so, you know, and like I say to you, it's all about doing your own research on these. But something I really want to cover with you today is a company that we've, you know, been working quite closely with recently, called Griffin AI. Obviously, AI in the name doesn't get you where it used to. You know, companies pivoting to just add AI to the name. It's like the whole .com thing back in the day. You have to have substance, and this really is a market that's all about a flight to quality. So I'm going to show you what's interesting about that. If you've got any others to ping forward, that's the only one for me at the moment. Like I said, it is very selective. It's a very difficult market out there at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the when not to trade, how to preserve capital, and understanding your trading environment into the chart request show today as well. So please do let me know if you've got any questions, and also if you've got any tickers that you want me to take a look at. So we're going to start with Bitcoin. So this is where we are today. One little thing that I would just like to mention at the moment, I'm not sure, I'm waiting on a little bit more information coming in, but obviously we have had a little bit of positive news towards the, let's say, rectifying the government shutdown in the US. So there's talk that it could happen, that they could reopen that this week, could be next week. But until we get confirmation on that, we're certainly seeing positivity flow through into risk markets, just unfortunately not flowing through into Bitcoin. Actually, trading the S&P 500 yesterday was sharing with members the idea that we had this major liquidity pocket, which I'll show you on the charts later on. And ultimately, when you get to those areas, you're finding where's the key supply, where's the key demand. Price was pinging around at the beginning of the New York trading session yesterday, and we were waiting for either a key break above this level to show that, the strong sellers that were there had been, absorbed, and buyers had kind of taken control of the market. And I was really looking for some impetus to be injected into crypto, which unfortunately we didn't get. So we are going to take a look at that. And as our wonderful Jojo says in the chat, everyone, don't hesitate to ask questions, or if you have any chart requests, all right, then absolutely share those in the chat. So anyway, let's crack on. Quick sip of tea while it's still warm for a change. And let's get ourselves into the game. So something I wanted to mention on top of the government shutdown at the moment, remember the government data is being impacted by this shutdown, which makes things a little bit trickier. It's also the longest government shutdown, I believe, now. So we're really entering slightly uncharted territories. Risk markets, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, etc., have kind of brushed it off, and people are still happy to have their exposure to that. There is a little concern that this AI kind of bubble, I was reading about this yesterday, and actually I'm more in the camp that AI isn't a bubble yet, and I'll tell you as for why. If we look, and I'm comparing this to historical bubbles, if you look at historical bubbles like the dot-com crash, for example, it's all propped up on debt. Right, this is capex spending. This is different. This is companies using their profits. All right. So I think the last time I checked, it's around about the late 20s, early 30% of this is debt driven. And let's not forget these valuations on these companies in the dot-com bubble. Just using that as an example. Obviously, you've got things like Asian tigers as well, and property bubbles across the world. China obviously being one of the biggest ones. We look at the key factors that are involved with that. They're debt-driven. Valuations are far too high. They've either got bad earnings or they're nowhere near. If you look at the PE and also forward projected earnings. Now, the forward projecting earnings are a little bit skewed at the moment with AI, in terms of what they look to bring in versus. But the rest of it really isn't kind of signaling that. However, it makes sense for the equities to have cooled off, and we called it around about a 5 to 6% correction would be healthy. At the moment, I think we saw around about 6.5% before the recovery. Now, there is the idea that what is good for the goose is good for the gander. So hopefully, as we see, the continuation of the upside to risk markets, capital will start to rotate into Bitcoin, from Bitcoin into altcoins. But it's definitely been a tricky cycle, and we are going to take a look at Bitcoin dominance today. So just so you know what we've got on here at the moment, we've got BTC, ETH, Bitcoin dominance, the S&P 500 through the ES contract, the volatility index, the DXY, GAIN, which is Griffin AI's token. That's the one that I've got my eye on at the moment. That's the new one kind of coming into the space for AI that we've got a lot of interest in. And then our good friend Craigie Boy has asked for Solana as well. So let's grab Sol on the list. And we're good to go. Guys and girls, please do remember that you can just request these, and I'll get through as many of them as I can. So 9 minutes in, ramble finished, news update. One last thing is we've got tentative this week for CPI, PPI, unemployment, and retail sales numbers as well. That's Thursday and Friday. At the moment, not sure if they're going to come through. Obviously, we've been restricted that data apart from the one CPI print that we had that, was done really late on a Friday, came in incredibly soft and really helped that kind of, prop up the risk markets, coincidentally or not coincidentally, right before the FOMC rate decision. So back to the technicals. What are we looking at? We got the Bitcoin chart here on the daily, as we said on Monday's show, holding of this level. We're looking for price to push up from here. Now, for a lot of this, I'm utilizing lower time frames for even swing considerations. I am ultimately looking to get intraday positions at the moment, hold a decent amount of them, take a little bit of profit, secure the position, and just see if we can compound any of these moves higher. We're definitely approaching, some bottoms or some bottom-like environments at the moment, especially when we look at altcoins. So, it is one of those things. People have just been getting pummeled trying to long these at the moment. So it's a treacherous environment to be in. But you just, as a trader, and especially as a swing trader, you have to be ready when your levels come into play. Now, I thought that this was going to be absolutely ripe for the picking down here, 98, 130.9. But, we didn't. We've held this really well, and it's showing quite a lot of strength. But as we do look back here, if we look at this as an area, focusing on the wicks to the downside and the major ones to the upside here, we can see that this makes sense, this area. Yeah, this is where the consolidation before that really nice move up, fast expansion, inefficient move, Gap got retested into here. We continued up, sharper dip down. And again, every time we're moving into this area, taking the liquidity of the prior swing, take the liquidity of the prior swing. And this was a great move higher. So now what I'm focused on here, and the reason that, we were highlighting this, because, quite often I'll look at a low like this and say, okay, well, when you've got a liquidity pool like this below it as well, chances if it runs this and it's running hot, it's probably going to really dip into this. But if the buyers are really going to step in anywhere, this is my key area of interest here. Why this? Just simply the consolidation, the down move before the start of this major expansion here. We led up to this point. This is what, hence this consolidation here is what supported the market through here, even in here. This was the mad wick that came down into the really, really strong buying pressure, but continuation really stalled here. And ultimately, since it's been a seller's market. Burnside, my friend, how are you doing today? So, really simple. When it comes into your level, you got to be ready. I'm not actually in any open swing positions from this. I didn't really see anything that I liked. And I also don't think that the upside potential, well, for me anyway, for how I trade, is really with Bitcoin at the moment, more using this to get a deeper understanding of the market in terms of, if Bitcoin can show a bit of strength. I really want to see Bitcoin back in here, basically. This is the high from back in January 2025, was a really, really key level, especially when we look at these levels on the weekly. We can see how it kept price suppressed through this stretch here. That was running from kind of mid-May through until the end of June. We got the breakout here, the beginning of July. Price came back down into this, back into this consolidation that led to the rip higher. Buyers stepped in again, and now buyers are stepping in again. Now, don't get me wrong, we're driving deeper and deeper into this area, right? But ultimately, we need to just trade what we've got in front of us. This, at the minute, is still kind of, you've got an upper range here. We've got this consolidation, which is the secondary range. I'd like to see price back up in this area here. And, unless we really attack the higher, have a blow off top, and then really everything collapses back down, I think Bitcoin grinding up in here, spending a little bit of time in this area, could see that capital rotate into altcoins, as long as the risk markets behave themselves. So back to the daily quickly. What's the plan from here? Well, the early signs of recovery that we look for here is the creation of these supply and demand areas. Now, these are either at the extremes of, ranges or levels, or we're in a trend, in which case we're looking for these to develop, right? So, for example, we can see here the move higher that took liquidity, back into this consolidation before this drop in the market. Price came back to retest this area once, retest it again. For those of you that remember in the live show, we just had a dotted line above here. I think it might still be on our daily. No. Okay, so we took it off. But basically, the dotted line up here is what we're looking for price to close above. Why is that? Because I want to see the sellers lose control of this area. Ultimately, sellers are dominating this. Buyers tried to step back in. Price sold off. Retest. Again, a sell-off. We did show strength here. Then we had this large move higher, just ultimately got absorbed again within this area and then sold off. So this is obviously a key area up here that I'll be watching when we step back in. Any strong move inside this and holding this area is really, really key. This level's at 109,998.9. I'll call it, a reclaim of 110, really that kind of area. But what I'm watching for here is, for example, when you get these secondary consolidations, or tertiary, then we break down, if we're closing below the bodies of this, then those buyers, or that relief is then offside. Price is then most likely to head for liquidity pools lower. So now we've seen absorption come in here. And, if you're not knowing what that is, just using a candlestick chart without using, volume spread analysis, etc., you can just see this in terms of the candles coming down. You're not going to be as accurate as if you're using, volume and stuff, right? But ultimately, as price is driving into this, look at the long downside wicks at this level, right? Now, think of the liquidity resting here, for those players that stepped into the market to get the market pushed back here. This was a key level. So the fact price hasn't managed to get really back down below it is a really, really good sign for the bulls, in my opinion, on a short to medium term basis. One of the things we want to be aware of here, obviously, is, we've got a small gap here, which we closed above, didn't really pay much respect to. Slightly larger one here, these inefficiencies, basically as, sellers just dominated the market. So they're just flushing price, and, price is just getting available lower and lower and lower until it finds a point where those sellers are then absorbed and then the buyers kind of take control of the situation here. So now we just want to see this level hold, right? If we look at this on a lower time frame, this really here, and if we're just focusing on the bodies, is really just a consolidation within this area. All right, we'll draw this in on a lower time frame. What we want to see now is that this is the breakout of this area. This is the retest, and this area is now holding. So one of the first things that I look for as we have the reverse of this here, we're looking for the bullish candle, the up close candles, the white ones on my chart. They could be green or a whole host of colors on yours. When that gets closed below, it's telling me that, sellers still control this market and price is moving lower. So the opposite of that is true here. Looking for these, bearish candles here when closed above to create an area of demand. Okay, so sellers were again trying to control the market here, but actually buyers took control back. Now we're holding this area here. Price dipping into this is starting to get that buy the dip situation. So let's move to a 4 hour and see how we can capitalize on this. Well, the first thing that I want to talk about here that links in with the show, talking about when to trade, when not to trade, understanding your environment and preserving capital. Well, as we just kind of highlighted on here, and I'm not going to make this too preachy, guys, right? But it is important to understand this, especially if you're new or relatively new to the markets, is that people trying to long all kinds of moves within here. Yeah, I didn't long this. We got a nice move to the upside, but we were talking about the idea, look, this is an area to short until we get some serious reclaim, until we retest this area and something like this consolidation, for example. Yeah. So what's this? This, when we're closing above it, especially with this nice strong move, we're looking at this as an area of demand, right? An order block, price coming back into this. If buyers really control this area, this is where they need to step back up. There's going to be orders remaining there, especially when you see these sharp moves away from it. Those orders then get filled, as well as new buyers stepping into the market. Ultimately, they weren't able to capitalize on this. When we close below these areas, we do two things. We align that we've inverted this area, right? So basically we violated that. So mitigation is when price comes back down below it, when you retest into these areas, gives any of the buyers that are holding through this drawdown the opportunity to step out of the market. And then again, I'm just focusing on the bodies here. We've then confirmed this as an area of supply, right? So price getting back to this area here tells us two things. Well, where are we? Well, we're trapped between demand here and supply here. So on the lower time frames, we can afford to trade this almost like a range. If we want more consistent upside, again, it aligns with our levels here. We want to see price, coming a strong expansion into this area. Then you want to see price probing this, right? But not really able to kind of get any headway, and then those sellers get absorbed. Price then allows itself to move up. And on the lower time frames, we look for those signatures that allow us to see the momentum coming into the market. So ultimately, while we're in here, we're looking up, but going to be a little bit cautious as we start to drive back into this area here. This is also representative of a higher time frame breaker, the down move, before the move higher, sweeping liquidity, trapping buyers, before we then get that breakdown again. Again, looking at where market participants are in the most pain. If I want to enter trades, then realistically, I want to enter with the idea that, the people on the other side of that trade, to me, are being forced to make decisions they either don't want to make, or forced to do it without having all the information they want or all the time that they want, right? So buyers stepping in here, sharp move away from that, taking those buyers out. They've either been taken out for the level with the stop loss, meaning that if we don't see a strong recovery here, again, we're looking for price to seek liquidity lower down. But it also means that if they are holding through this drawdown, as price comes back to this area here, it allows them to step back out. So we want to see this reaction here back to demand, and we want to see who's winning out. Ultimately, obviously, we want to see price back above here, but it does allow us to get some more information. So all of a sudden, we've got a greater understanding of our environment here. Where are the sellers in control? Where are the buyers starting to gain control? Okay, and I really like this move up here. I like this one as well. The recovery off the low, we swept out some lows. Big, strong, bullish candles stepping in, showing us that buyers are willing to step in here. And again, as highlighted previously, I'm just going to draw this with a back line. This is the area that we're looking for, the consolidation before price reclaims this high shifts the dynamic of the market, then price comes back in, buyers hold this out beautifully, ultimately sellers get absorbed, and then we see that relief pump higher. So now we're looking at this area, and the next area I'm looking at as we're following these up is this one. Okay, so this consolidation here, this down move before, again, we got that beautiful pop, price retested this area. We saw some really nice upside momentum. Now, as we look on the lower time frames, we can see this consolidation here before this large drop is where price rejected, showing that sellers still have control here. This is how we get these nice opportunities to buy these pullbacks, all right? Because again, pullbacks into here intraday, no issues with that long at all. As explained on Monday, not one I was looking to participate in because of this overhead supply. But, you know, as a nice little intraday scalp would have worked out beautifully, I think. But we were also kind of fighting with this area. The fact that we were consolidating within it, for me, means we really could have gone either way. So what we're looking for here is this becoming another range, yeah, and then price popping out of that. And then coming back into it is a sign that this is the deviation. Price is now back within this range, so we're now looking for an attack of the range higher, yeah, and then ultimately a breakout to these levels here. If we were using this in terms of volume, okay, we have the expansion. This is the start of the consolidation. Look how beautiful this range is here. Rejection at range high, price comes back in outside of the range low. Failed to really build that momentum on the way down. So we wait for these areas to be retested. Moves into this little volume shelf here. Move very quickly. When you look at the lower areas of volume here, price rips through that. But again, when we saw this here, obviously there was no chance to get the retest. Price closed this beautiful 4-hour candle straight inside this morning. Now, as we look at this, we're looking for, which has just started, the 12 a.m. candle. We're looking for that to expand. Going to be watching the point of control here, which is 105.962, and then looking for price and see how we get this reaction at the higher range. As we saw here, price moving up, probing up, just barely touching into the breaker here or the overhead supply, then coming back in, closing within the range, showing weakness. You know, look at this area here, very, very low volume. It's closed back in an area of high volume, got back beneath the volume shelf, sold off. And now we can see that price is in this range. Very, very similar. I'm just going to clean this up a bit, guys, so that you can, we'll follow this through on the rest of the charts, right? But similar with this, we had this move to the downside here. So I'm looking at this and saying to myself, all right, this is the move down. When we had this amount of information here, yeah, we got the move higher, price step back in the range. Now, what was interesting here is, like with any range play, if we deviate the range higher, we look for price to close back in, we trade it to the midline, in this case the POC, and then breaking that back below the midline, we look for retest to trade it to the range low. In fact, we held the POC here, and yet we did kind of deviate down below it, but we held this area, and then look at this expansion out, right? Look at the strong move higher, price took liquidity from this higher here, small rejection, and then this was the confirmation of the breakout. So if we now extend this across, and just do it a bit thicker so it stands out for you guys. What are we doing? We're now retesting and holding that prior volume range, yeah? So for me, this whole thing was looking beautiful. As we step back in the range, I'm expecting more upside today. Doesn't mean that we're going to get this mad continuation all the way through. We have seen a very volatile environment, you know, news catalysts, fundamental catalysts, obviously what's happening with traditional markets, as well as a government shutdown, can all play a part. So in my opinion, if I'm looking to be long Bitcoin today, well, I got a pretty good idea of where I want to be long from. So let me take another sip of my ever colding brew, and we will get onto that. Ever chilling brew would have been better, wouldn't it? Right, so here we are. Now, if I'm looking for this to really step up here, I want to see price close above this. This is the up move. Price flushed out some liquidity. This is where the sellers were controlling the market, again, on the lower time frames. I want to see that across here, and I want to see price back above it. However, something that really is of interest here, and I really like using these gap inversions as well. So you'll normally see these on my chart. You've seen them. It's like a purple color. This is an inefficiency in price, yeah. So in terms of, delivery, basically, you're seeing the gap. These wicks don't cross, so it's a thin area in the order book. We can see it with the volume here as well. So when price comes back to these areas to rebalance them, it's a perfect opportunity for sellers to step back in, all right, as well as this area here that they were in control of previously. So I want to see those sharp, aggressive moves away, which we didn't get. Price, when it violates, especially with a candle like this and moves above, I then look for price to dip back down into this area to treat it as support and then move higher. So on lower time frames today, I do think that pullbacks here really could give some opportunities, especially if we can get something and price doesn't run too hot as we move towards the London trading session. Now we can see what happened. We had this large expansion, consolidation, expansion again, retest of the prior consolidation. So at the moment, this is looking healthy. If I was looking for continuation from here, then this is the area I want to see hold. This ultimately, if we look at what happened previously here, price is a large expansion, comes back down to rebalance the inefficiency, driving in the opposite of what I just said about sellers. This is giving buyers the opportunity to step into the market. They gladly take that. Price closes above, just a slither here, but we see what happens as it grinds up here, sets another area of demand that we've come off the lows, retested this area. We get a nice initial pump, rejected as liquidity is taken above that high, showing maybe a little bit of apprehension. Price then comes back down, but can't get back down below this level. Again, at what point would I look to consider shorts here? Back down here, maybe to the value area high, but also of the previous volume range, of course, this consolidation that led to this really big pump. All right. When we see these and price comes back to these areas, we want to pay attention because this is where the buyers really took control of the market and the sellers stepped away or ultimately got absorbed. So as we're looking at this here, we've not really seen this great continuation pump here. We've retested into this once, retested into it again. So we really want to see price having some form of continuation here. However, as long as we hold this area, my line in the sand is this. All right, I'm looking at this as the consolidation before price moved up and took liquidity. There's two real key areas that I'm going to be interested in today. The main one being if we close below this, I would look to retest of this and this value area low and then price to move lower. All right, so just to show you here, it's the value area low from this range. This is the value area high from the previous one. So we're looking for support of this one for price to move back into this one. Now, where I'm going to be a little bit cautious here is we've got this consolidation on the left that led to this really strong move lower. Okay. As we've done that, we've reclaimed this area. Now we've ripped back inside this. So this area here should really offer some form of support. Those sellers are in control of the market, obviously offside here, retest, giving them the opportunity to get out if they were still holding, or ultimately people that were looking to sell this off the bat and have been blown through that, haven't had their stop losses taken, price returns to here after seeing this move up. You would imagine they would think, well, okay, maybe I'll just cover here. I'm going to step out of the position here, or maybe I'm going to hedge by going long myself. Either way, these areas here are key for me. All right. So this represents the down move before the sweep of liquidity on the high, close below that here. If we start to see this area act as resistance, then I think we're going to look to probe into these lows. If we see a fast recovery of these lows and a move higher, we see strength step in and we see the test of the value area low, then I think price can continue higher from here. However, if we close below this, I'm looking for this to become resistance. All right. And if that's the case, we've got a very, very thin move here. If we just look at the move up, for example, yeah, hardly any volume here, hardly any volume here. Price could really that's why if we do whip back down and retest this and we step back inside, I think that's a good sign. But ultimately, if we start closing in below this, price really could start to free fall back down to here, which is about 103.158. So that's the plan for Bitcoin. We're now going to rip through, actually it worked out quite well. We're bang on 30 so 30 minutes through the show. And again, like I said, I'm not going to really preach this across, but what we're looking at here is when we should be trading, when we shouldn't be trading. When do we not want to trade? When we see a move like this off the lows, right? Thin, inefficient move, moving higher, and people just ape in. Yeah, but BC, hell, man, I could have made some money here, right? In this pump. It doesn't make it a good trade, and it doesn't mean that you understand the environment. Retests of this area, right? Or, in fact, for people with real strong conviction, looking at areas like this, looking at the structural recoveries. This would have been brave on a 15-minute chart, right? Coming into London this morning, I admit. But I would still rather see people taking longs from here because at least there's, a retest here and a reclaim the prior value area high offered beautiful support. We've got key liquidity targets above. However, what we want to do, same as this, right? You say, well, yeah, but I saw price breaking down here and I knew price was going lower. Real classic move of people that tell you they know where it's going. You know, I knew it was moving. I knew it was moving. So I just jumped in here. Then what happens? People start to short too late. You're coming into a key area. These little moves on lower time frame charts can take you up before you get continuation versus understanding, okay, we've had the strong move away. So this area here with the consolidation, yeah, distribution, price now selling off. Okay, so retest of this area here or retest of newly formed areas of supply like this, for example, give us two things. They give us an opportunity now to look at this. I wouldn't really want to short from here unless it was real small scalp intraday because we're holding value area low. However, as we look at this here, what else does this tell us? If we expand this out and say, well, this is the consolidation here. Yeah, and again, if we focus on the bodies, sometimes it can give you a cleaner read here because, you know, bodies are obviously where the main volume of the trading took place or what price achieved. The wicks ultimately just show us, you know, the failed part of the auction. So as we look here, price closing underneath this consolidation, and we're patient, we wait for two things. Newly formed area here, there's the consolidation. All right, no problem. Well, what else can we see here? Yeah, what's our plan, our playbook? Looking for newly formed areas of supply. This is where the buyers stepped in. This is where they're offside. Closed below here, retest of this. Key level below. You want to be trading between these areas of space. Not just that. The way I like to look at the markets here is, okay, well, if I'm taking this trade lower, then first of all, I can secure risk down here. I can move my stop loss to entry because I'm at a key level of support. As price continues to trundle down, fine, you can always take some more profit down here. You maybe don't get the run as you want. Price steps back in. You get that expansion overnight, but you're secure and your stop loss is safe. The other really key thing for me is looking at this, is that this gives me a playbook immediately for what I want to do. Hey, Shay, welcome, brother. Craigie boy. Yes, Craig Parker, of course, mate. Sui, please. Last time we did it on OKX. Yeah, sure. Let's take a look over Sui as well, mate. Let me just add that in. Perfect. All right. So the last thing I'll say about this is the reason that this is really important for me and how I trade is because if I'm short in here on this retest and then price does this and takes me out, then you can bet that I'm going to be looking for longs from here. Because if this is where the sellers control the market, those sellers have either been taken out of that or with price coming back down into here, you know, this then gives them the chance to mitigate, all right, chance to cover, chance to step out of those positions, buyers to step in. You've got to ask yourself the question that if sellers are really controlling this market, bearing in mind they've got market structure on their side, sentiment, the full works, and we've got clean targets below us, then they should control this area. If they don't and they're out of control of this area, where was the last point price was being controlled by the sellers was here before this big drop. So you can trade into this area and then you do the same thing. You're asking yourself that question of, okay, are we gaining control of this area? Are bulls stronger here that they're able to enforce their will on the market? Or do the sellers, in fact, still control this? All right, so just really kind of giving that some context, which is why we're looking at this situation here. You know, looking at this on the 15-minute chart, looking at it on the 4-hour chart, it's a buyer's market at the moment. We're back in the range from a volume perspective. We've got our key upside targets. So today is about spotting opportunities to go long here. But also for me, like normal, you know, I'm very much a traditional market trader as well, you know, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, etc. But I'll be looking at other, you know, key cryptos at the moment, looking for it in terms of, you know, volume for sure. Also looking at key narratives that are popping off at the moment. That's why we're going to take a look at again, which is Griffin AI's coin. Right, so let's take a look at Bitcoin dominance, all right? And remember, guys, if you have got anything, please do let us know. And yeah, good reminder, Jojo. I haven't forgot about old Craigie boy. We are definitely going to get round to that. So here we are on BTCD. All right. Why do we use this? For anybody that doesn't know, we're looking at this is the dominance that Bitcoin holds over the cryptocurrency market. Ultimately, as this is going up, typically pretty bad news. If we look for altcoins, if we compare this with ETH, for example, yeah, we can see Bitcoin dominance grinding up, ETH just getting obliterated. All right, then you see these small kind of corrections here on Bitcoin, and look at the pump here on ETH, yeah? But then really, if we look at the origin of this, you know, the big move higher here from Ethereum, you can see it happened when Bitcoin dominance really started to cascade. And then as it started to find a bottom in here, look how price consolidated. We started getting these sharp sell-offs, and then as price really started to spike higher, then we saw, well, exactly what that did to altcoins, right? So this is what we were looking at. We really wanted to see price contained in here and moving lower. We didn't get that, but we did get a very, very sharp rejection here from one of our key pivot points. Let's just extend that across. The lower one being down here. We didn't quite reach that, but that still remains a key target. Level of 57.71 here remains a key target we've had on here for many, many years. It's just, for me, I like to see price under this and really moving lower. That's when we can realistically start looking at alts. And I think the other issue that we have here as well is if we look at these, this doesn't really look that weak at the moment. We need to see some sharp moves lower. We need to see some key levels starting to get lost. And people go on here and just go, yeah, but it doesn't really trade like a chart, does it? No, but it doesn't mean that you can't get an understanding of the data. It just depends how much work you're willing to put in, right? I think one of the most underutilized things on TradingView is this feature, right? Up by the ticker at the top, the plus symbol. All right, well, what do you want to know? We just covered Ethereum, right? And people on the show yesterday and the day before were asking me, all right, well, what about correlation? Had some really good questions, by the way, from all the members that joined us yesterday on the private live show. I think it might have even been made public, but really, really good questions, actually, from a few people that are in the chat today as well. They're saying, well, how do you trade correlation, BC? You often mention it. You know, we look at these things, but it's really hard to spot, etc. And really, really, really interesting to look at. It's all about understanding how correlations do slip in and out. In fact, if you want to watch that, I'm sure it's available on our live tab on YouTube, so I won't spend time kind of grinding over it. But something like this, I would say, okay, well, if you understand what Bitcoin dominance does, okay, in a nutshell, Bitcoin dominance dropping, we want to see it on the way down. How's that affecting the market? It means that we often see capital rotating into altcoins, gives us those more explosive opportunities. All right, again, understanding our environment, right? Why the hell would you be trying to long altcoins? Yeah, there's some great outliers at the moment. In fact, Pitt, one of a fantastic swing trader, one of the best in my opinion, and definitely one of the most underrated and undervalued. Wonderful member of the TBN trading team, who I really is a huge pleasure for me, to be head of trading for this team, because there's so many exceptional traders in there. And I was having a conversation with Follis, who's the head of Chroma Trading, one of my favorite groups, obviously outside of my own, and just one of my favorite traders and people. We're saying this, we sat there having this conversation about how we're just, the key to the success of building a good trading team is just making sure that the traders you hire are better than you are, right? And these guys are absolutely fantastic. And Pitt just smashed out a beautiful scalp trade this morning on Asta. But this is using stuff that people don't really understand. The amount of research time on chain, understanding of community, understanding again of environment, and preserving capital, having the capital there to deploy. Asta came into his key level. He had conviction. All of the other parts that he lines up to get those high probability trades, and just grabbed an absolute belter. And we're sat there this morning just after the London Open talking about saw that Craigie boy. Yeah, don't you worry. We've got like 9 to finish, 20 minutes. That's easy peasy, right? But he sat there. We're chatting this morning about how difficult it is to spot these opportunities, and then an hour later, he's ripping a scalp out, right? So I'm not saying there aren't opportunities in alts. I'm saying it's difficult to find them. And if we really want those opportunities to present themselves, we need to understand the environment isn't great for alts if Bitcoin dominance is strong. The other thing I would say is, if you're looking at correlation, get yourself on here, use this symbol, look at things like the volatility index, for example, right? Look at that and start to understand, okay, how's this affecting Bitcoin dominance, right? How's Bitcoin dominance, how's the volatility index affecting Bitcoin? How's it affecting the indices? What's the correlation between indices at the moment, risk on markets, and Bitcoin? Why isn't this flow and follow through coming when we've got prosperous risk markets, all right? So, as Craigie Boy does bring a great point to, I am diverging a little bit from my own path. So what we're going to do is we're going to look. Let's take a look at ETH. I believe we do this on a Binance contract for our dear friends over there. So this was the plan here. Obviously, I'll show you this on a lower time frame, but the key pivot point resting above. We've got resistance all the way through here. All right. Price has come back down now, tested the range high of this prior range that we were looking at. And, I really did think, I have to say, that this area would hold a little bit better. We poked out the bottom of this, and now we've kind of come back inside. I think you can see this in pretty illiquid environments. Not used to seeing it too much on things like ETH. Normally does trade a little bit cleaner, but ultimately it really hasn't in this situation. A bit of tea. And so what am I looking at here? Well, simple, right? Again, environment. If this is a level of support, then I'm looking for price to do exactly what we looked at on Bitcoin. Yeah, so we had price close above the bearish candles here. We're now retesting this area. This is where we want to be long from. All right. At the moment, we are going to really have to dive into these lower time frames. Like I say, that's how I'm positioning. You know, it has been quite treacherous to take these things on higher time frames in terms of the swing trades. But again, what are we looking at? Well, we just held this area beautifully. This was the area we were looking to break out above. So let me just get rid of this for a minute. Why is this really key? Well, quite simply, if you just spend a bit of time looking at where the wicks are, if you've got really clean information like this, yeah, you see the wicks to the downside here. All right. Even if you just drew a line on this that says, okay, you know, are you capturing most of the wicks to the downside here? Yeah, I mean, look, this is where price is struggling to move, absorption. Okay, we don't catch that one in there. So what do we think that it could be then? Well, looking at this small consolidation in here and this move is probably what's propping price up between these two areas. So this is why when we look at the downside wicks here, but focusing on these upside wicks, we were looking for a breakout of this area and a retest. Now, yes, we've dipped back down below that. That's not really an issue. The key thing here is showing us that this was really, really key resistance. You know, a massive sell wall here, aggressive buyers coming in, passive sellers regaining control. But again, look, price only managed to correct down to here, a perfect retest of our newly formed demand area here. Price takes liquidity, sets the down close candle. We close above it here. Price comes back in. Those buyers still exerting great control on the market. A little bit of the reason you get these dips a bit lower here is because we're now in this. All right. Yeah. So this consolidation here, or this down move here, as price broke out away from that, this is where we're now saying, okay, are the buyers still here? And this what gives us the good opportunity. But we're not looking at that now because that's been and gone. So in terms of continuation from here, this really is the area that I'm most interested in. I would consider this as well, but this is a very small candle within the range of this. But that was the last attempt higher here from the bulls before price really flushed out. So if I'm looking for a key point of rejection, it's here. So if I'm looking for a key point of rejection, what does that mean? Well, if I understand that this is the area that we're looking for sellers to regain control, right, or to hold control, then if this is the up move before that flush, then I want to make this the breaker line. And the play is really simple, all right? Price getting above here, holding this area is where we move up from. Unless we get those conditions, yeah, then I'm looking for price to hold this area. But ultimately, again, weak bounce off of this, expecting buyers to show a bit more strength here. So unless we get that continuation from here, a bit cautious if we come down. The play for that would be seeing this get swept out from the lows, taking liquidity from this consolidation here, and seeing a pretty quick recovery of this would also be an area that I would then look to go long as well. So we will leave that on the chart, ready to explore again on Monday and see if we get any of those opportunities playing through. Okie doke, right, so because he's waited so patiently for so long, although I believe actually has 3 requests in today, Craigie boy, which I love. What was it? You were Sui, ETH, and Solana. Okay, so we've knocked one off with ETH. Let's do Sol next, shall we? Right, here we go. The great squiggle chart. This looks like some kind of lost language, doesn't it, if you remove the candles? So again, look, this was the key area. We were just looking for this to hold. This came back down. This was super messy. Popped its head back above. As we'll look on here, this was the playbook for holding back above. But again, and this was, you know, capping the market, moving back below. Any kind of continuation back below here. This just presented the key areas for the bulls to reclaim. If not, ultimately, they keep smashing into this, getting absorbed. Then price is going to look for the key consolidations lower down, for which we were looking at this. All right, and again, kind of poked through a little bit ugly here, a little bit liquid. But we do expect that with crypto. It's not going to trade as cleanly as things like the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, when we're washing through hundreds of billions a day. So this, I mean, there's obviously a really keen consolidation here. I would absolutely just be trading this as a consolidation play. You know, we've had the breakdown here. This is the information that we've got. We're holding the range lows. We're looking to make a move on the point of control. Excuse me. So looking at this here, getting above and holding the point of control, I think is a really, really good start. We don't exactly have tons of data here. In truth, the safest play that I would look at here is I'd be saying to myself, all right, so first of all, the breaker. Yeah, this is the down move here before price swept liquidity. Excuse me. So that for me is a really key area. All right. I'd want to see price above here. I mean, look at this move down here. Yeah. Really, really sharp, inefficient move down. So this consolidation here becomes the target. Yeah. So let's get our squiggles back in place. So that's what we're aiming for. But ultimately, what we want to see is price getting back above here, showing some structure on the lower time frames, and then we look to kind of target up to here. In terms of aggressive plays, your aggressive plays really are from the range lows. Right? We've held that range though. Now, if we were on a lower time frame, for example, like the 15-minute, we look for those structural recoveries. Yeah, so here, nice dip down into the lows. Price comes back up. I'd imagine we get some kind of divergence here. All right, we can see price setting higher lows. But then really it's this for me. Yeah, it's this down move here. The initial one is here. We see the move into the lows. Price holds it really nicely. So this is where we set a newly formed area of demand. We take some liquidity. Price comes back up. Dips quite deep into this here and then kind of shuffles along a little bit. So then when we get this move here, right, again, not exactly the greatest in terms of, momentum. You really want to see these explosive moves, but price does come back above here. We see it holding. Then when we see this hold, remember what we were discussing about previously. We're just looking for these areas that should be controlled, in this case by the sellers being overtaken by the buyers. And this inversion here was just a perfect example of that. One of my favorite setups, seeing a purge back into demand. Obviously, this is for a long, seeing gaps that give sellers the opportunity to step back in when, obviously they come back to the market, comes back to rebalance this. The other area here, and it really wouldn't have given you a great opportunity, but looking at the consolidation within here, when price breaks out on this beautiful high volume candle, you can also use things like the CVD, for example, here as well, guys. Yeah. So make that a little bit bigger, just to help give you a little bit of extra confidence. Yeah. Like look at things like this. We see this massive high volume candle coming in here. We see exactly the same thing on the chart here, match showing that there's a lot of selling volume coming in here. What I'm then looking for here are our divergences as well. So what we can see is we've got a lower low being set here, while we have a higher low, same place on the screen. So if we get this and then we see this reversal come into here and we see that large expansion, it gives us a great understanding that price can be moving up here. And then ultimately we're just looking for these consolidations to hold as price continues to move up. All right. So Sol, I think looking like it's got the start of a nice recovery. I know people aren't really, massively trading this on the higher time frames, but if we look at previous TA that we've shared, very, very similar principles. We're just looking for these key areas, right? So like with this, we never got this. As long as we're holding below these levels, these consolidations, we're playing to the downside, right? They were the conditions for trading it long. We got conditions down into here, but I wasn't trading Sol then. This was the first place we were stepping back in. It was looking for a rejection here and then a bounce to reclaim this, or looking for price to close above here, which we got the retest, then just trading it to the highs. This symbolizes the fact that there was no longs on at this point. Again, this was the area controlling the market for me. This is where the buyers stepped in. They tried to hold this. This is when they then became offside. I'm not saying they held through this drawdown, but obviously some of them did. But obviously the sell orders that were present here were still keeping the market suppressed. So there we have the passive orders. We have aggressive buyers just getting absorbed into this area. Ultimately, they can't overtake it, so then price starts to sell off. So these are the same principles that we've been putting in through here. We just really haven't seen any of these key reclaims in this area, which is why I leave these on the chart. They're always good to study. And ultimately, these are all kind of things that should always be going into your journal, right, so that you understand them. So playbook really simple for me here on Solana. I am cautious. I either want to see price back above the value area high here, but realistically, by the time we get to that, we are slamming straight into this supply. Patience is a virtue, and I think we wait for price to get back above here, and then back above and holding the kind of 170s is how I'd be looking at it, and then for price to rip. I do think we could see some more upside price action here as well. And like I said, if I was trading this on lower time frames, it would surely be a sign of strength if these down moves in here, these consolidations, if this is a little range here, think about it like this. If this is a little range in here, then what you want to see is price deviating the low, strong breakout from the high, retest, and then that's where I would be a buyer. All right. Awesome. All right. So that is ETH covered as well, Bitcoin dominance. We're going to take a very quick look at ES as well, right, which is our S&P 500. This should hopefully just be a nice naked chart, he says. Right, so look, this is really, really important. Again, coming back to environment and back again to when it's understanding the right time to trade and when not to trade. So with price here, after this pin bar candle, I was really surprised more people weren't paying attention to this. Why? Because we had this sharp move to the upside, downside here in the previous corrective move. Then price gapped up here, and then look at the absorption we start to see on these long downside wicks. Pin bar candles in a continuation format are really, really important. Yeah, so look, we're still bullish here. People that were getting bearish on this really don't understand market structure, and these moves provide such good opportunities in the market, right? But if we're looking here, price has just been grinding up forever, right? But if we look at the pin bar candles in continuation, as well as engulfing candles, continuation, pin bar candle here, 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 one right here at the top, all right, they got flushed out, but then it's kind of in between a pin bar and a doji, but this is a nice big body pin bar with a short nose, pin bar, pin bar. This pin bar was just beautiful, right? Now, again, people will argue, is the head really big enough to be a pin bar? Well, what I really care about here is this, right? The sellers tried to do this, and that's what happened. Taking out this low into this consolidation that led to this massive rip. If those buyers aren't there, wait for price to come back down below them, yeah? And then you can look for retest to sell it off. But, you know, I don't understand the logic in kind of selling into these, really. You're kind of late to the party. Again, this is where you start to lose the up close candles here and here. And all that time you've got ready-made liquidity here to target, all right? So again, knowing where you're trading from. Anyway, the reason I want to show you ES here is we've got this lovely move where we've now reclaimed this area here. So what's happened here? Yeah, here's our down close candle. What's happened? Price has flushed out the lows, come back above, looking for this to hold as an area of demand. Price dipped down, didn't quite tag into this, came into the wicks. Now we're moving higher. You know, this is the all-time high. So this is what we're looking to run into over here. So while this is strong, it should normally mean quite good things for risk assets. So we're just waiting for that rotation into alts. So with that in mind now, I've covered that, covered the VIX for you very quickly as well. This is something I think people really don't pay enough attention to. This is the volatility index, all right? So these are puts on the S&P 500. So think of it as like a fear index, or think of it like this, you know, more this is moving up, more shorts are being opened on the S&P 500, which normally won't mean very good news for Bitcoin, crypto, or risk assets. 20 is a key level for the VIX. Ideally, risk assets perform best when price, when the VIX is below 20. 10 is ambitious, but again, 30 is another key level. But if we look at this here on the daily, or actually if we look at it, say, on like a 4 hour where we get a little bit more information, and again, we use our old friend here, the comparison symbol, and we put the NASDAQ, and we put Bitcoin on here. Yeah, Bitcoin in green, the NASDAQ in blue, what we can see here. And actually, let's move this to a line chart as well, so it's cleaner, the black line being that. What we can see here is, you know, the volatility index dropping here. We see great progress here on Bitcoin and beautifully aligned with the NASDAQ. All right. So again, technology laden index covering all of the Magnificent Seven. That's your Microsoft, Tesla, Nvidia, etc. And then we see this here as, you know, the VIX just really starts to spike here. Really bad news for the indexes, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ selling off aggressively here, and obviously crypto following suit. Now we can see the VIX as of Friday really starting to tick down here, and we've seen that resurgence here in the NASDAQ. All right, now we're looking for that same thing here on Bitcoin. We had a little bit of a pullback here, but starting to set that higher low. All right, so do keep an eye on this. Ultimately, a little bit like Bitcoin dominance really for alts. If we want to see progress in risk markets and for that to flood into BTC, then the volatility index coming down, or the VIX coming down is a key part of that. Bless you. Husky in the background sneezing away. So, okay, dollar index, probably not really, you know, correlation kind of sliding in and out on that one. And then we have seen a rejection at this range high or range low for the upper range. Again, This is really kind of flying in and out of correlation at the moment. So we are cautious with this, but really a weak dollar is normally what we're looking for to wash through into risk assets. Right, Sui for Craigie Boy. Then we're going to cover Griffin, and then we're going to be tucked up in the next 5 minutes. Who knew? Huh? Who knew? Even with all the random bits of waffle, we still get through for the day. So let's take a look at Sui. Did you say we did it on OKX or something? Let's have a look. Let's have a look, Craigie Boy. We'll soon find out if any of the magic squiggles are there. No. So maybe it's on our Binance account. No. There we go. Right, so very colourful chart for me, actually. So we don't get rid of all of this stuff for the moment, right? So here we are, nice clean area, some pretty clean levels here, pivot points, more like boxes really, but you know, these are either taken, obviously support and resistance, obviously based on volume as well. So if I'm looking at SUI here on the daily, then what I can see is this is what's controlling the market for me. Yeah, this gap, this fair value gap here, this inefficiency in the market, price selling off, trying to get back above this, rejecting at the range high here. Now price is moving down. So super simple playbook here on SUI. It depends how we want to play this, right? This consolidation here is key, but actually as we look here, kind of difficult to take this as the range low really, but you know, really, I suppose technically where it's we've seen that consolidation. Oh, we can't do it on the crypto chart. So I'd be looking at this kind of area here, right, for a reclaim. Okay, and why this one? Because, you know, maybe a little bit lower than that in truth, right? Because I just want to see, I want it to encompass this consolidation before the breakdown. I want to know if this is an underside retest of this level and price breaks down. Ultimately, we've got this bearish gap here. We've got this kind of pivot point here, price coming in, finding early stage support, blasted through that, now trapped under this range low. If we can get above both of those, I think that's super bullish. And I'll tell you for why. We violate the bearish gap. Again, area the sellers should control. Sellers should be controlling this area here as well. Ooh. Yeah, sellers should be controlling this area here as well. So if we want that safe placing, a nice expansion above this, blowing through this area here. And then I don't even really mind if price comes back down to here. I just want to see this area hold. But in an ideal world, we would see this hold from here. So I'd say that's play number one. Or play number two would be seeing a move above here and then price kind of getting rejected to here. But I would want to see like the most minimal of dips above that. Then I want to see price kind of reclaim this area and then move up from here. All right, so that's 2.1807. And that is so clean for me on the daily. That is exactly how I'd be laying out my plan and will be laying out my plan here for SUI. So Griffin AI, what is this all about? So it's brought to my attention by the team. Like I said, we have a wonderful on-chain fundamental team, partnership team, business development unit as well. And every day, pretty much, I'm on to them and I'm like, guys, okay, what's coming across your desk? What do we need to be interested in terms of the trading team? Share that information with the trading team. We do our technicals. We look at it fundamentally. We look at it on-chain, etc. And this one's really interesting to us, all right? And now TBN have partnered with them. I always tell you if we've got an open partnership. Like I said, this isn't a shill from me. I don't shill on this show, and we don't shill as a company. We bring you in. You bring you companies that we're interested in, and I only bring you ones that I'm personally investing in or have invested in. All right. So what are Griffin AI? Right. So it's a project building an AI agent layer for DeFi. All right. Systems combined execution agents called TEA, Turbo for on-chain swaps, yield actions. Basically, it's like a no-code agent builder as well that lets anyone create custom research or trading agents as well. The ticker is GAIN. We're going to look at it here on KuCoin because what's amazing for them, and again, like we're seeing with all of these, you look at this, and when they sent me this, I was just like, how the effing hell am I supposed to do TA on this? With these projects, newly launched ones as well, you have to really dig down into the lower time frames. But ultimately, you know, holding these kind of levels, where do we see these explosive moves from? I'm not saying this is going to the moon, but I think it's got really, really good potential. So that's why I want to show you. Also, the other thing that's kind of caught my eye is the fact that these guys are in the top 5 gainers on KuCoin. All right, so that's no messing about there. That's a really, really big exchange. And to get on that, that's really, really piqued my interest. So before we run into the TA, what else do we need to know about them? All right, so it's a complete agentic DeFi stack designed to automate on-chain workflows, research, and execution through AI. One of the big things I love about this is the fact that we've got that AI narrative, and I do think narratives have played such a big part, probably a larger part than ever in the bull run that we've had. Though it's been choppy and a bit inconsistent, we're really seeing that flight to quality. So picking out these potential gems is such a really big part of getting success in this space. And, you know, our wonderful head of fundamentals and on-chain KZM, you know, is an absolute beast on this front as well. Fundamentals are really solid. We've got adoption across Ethereum and BNB chain, and it is growing fast. Top 5 on KuCoin as well. So I think it just brings us that bit of interest to look at this and say, okay, I love all the sound of that. I trust immensely in the team that I've got behind me. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to bring my expertise to it, which is, you know, price action, analysis, and a little bit of volume, but obviously focusing in quite heavily here on the former. So what have we got? I mean, first of all, huge upside potential, right? If it gets back to these kind of levels. Just 2,106%. So you don't have to get back up to those kind of levels, right? But obviously really important if we do. The reason I wanted to bring this to you today and not before is because I wanted to check really a few things. So if I'm looking at this chart, and we see this with a lot of, you know, especially early stage assets, illiquid assets, what are we asking ourselves? You should really be able to spot where the key kind of downside wicks stop and the upside wicks start, all right? So if you're just looking at that as a whole, I would say something like this. It's obviously not a line, it's an area, right? So you can always put the line in to start with and kind of say to yourself, oh, all right, okay, well, actually, I think it's probably more something like that. Yeah, so we're looking at this. We've got all the key downside wicks here as well. The upside wicks coming into it here where price really started to find resistance. And now we've blasted back above that and we're holding this key level. That's great for me. Down here, I really wanted to see what was going on because we did have some absorption coming in from here. I think, you know, people kind of buying in the lows, kind of looking at the news events, or actually, you know, not the worst place to take some profits or book in here because you're back at these lows. But I think they would have regretted selling out here because, you know, ultimately the strength really came in here and we never really lost any of the trend. So why am I looking at this here? Well, again, in tricky market conditions, we can really see this start to move. We've got this consolidation in here, which price is moving into at the moment. But for me, I see nothing but epic upside really above that. Of course, I can be wrong. I'm wrong on a relatively regular basis, as is every trader. But if I'm looking at this from here and I'm saying, okay, where's this really kind of key move, right? Where's this consolidation? Even if I'm looking at this area through here, and I'm saying, well, let's just see price get above this. Yeah, so for me, these are the two areas here. I know they seem quite large, but this consolidation here, price broke down, retested it a couple of times, ultimately sold off. It's now finding some resistance in here as well. So there's a few things that I like about this. We've had this beautiful retest here. Again, new area of demand set, price reclaiming this resistance level, getting back above it, turning it into support, showing buyers are controlling this area as we move higher. This would be the next key point for me, looking at price getting back above this. So something like this in terms of the journey from here, right? So price either moving above this here, coming back in, then moving here, and then that's where we really look to take on board. Maybe some early stage positions in here, but I would be kind of cautious of this level. I'm either happy to buy this higher or a move I would really quite like to see. Obviously, we could just rip through this, retest it and move. So same principle without this middle step. Or for price to come back down into this area, hold this here, yeah, and then show us some structure here, because then we can trade it back to this. Yeah, we can take some risk off the table. Then we can see if we get that move above, and then we can re-add here and start to move higher, kind of compounding, pyramiding into this from lower time frames, moving to higher ones. So do come and check this out, guys. Really keen to get your thoughts on it as well. Loads of you reach out to me, which I absolutely love, with your thoughts on it. You're like, this is what I'm thinking of the technicals. Actually, I've got this information on the fundamentals, but please do come across. Remember at the moment that our entire Discord is open. You can join the 30-day recovery program. All right, there's information going out every day. You get access to everything from courses to team calls to engaging with the team on a daily basis, as well as all the other best bits and pieces, as well as lots of access to Crypto Birb himself, his thoughts on the market, as well as one of the most successful probably crypto traders ever. that's not an exaggeration. The guy made Forbes 40 under 40 for F's sake, which was really interesting. No, 30 under 30. So that's me thinking about my age, my aspirations. I've got a very small time frame to get into that. I don't think this bull run's going to deliver it, but do come along, see if you like it. Look, not every group is for everyone, right? But I really, really do back what we provide over at the Birb Nest, and I certainly wouldn't be putting my name to it unless I did. And we got the most wonderful team over there of traders, community managers, everybody that's really pushing in the right direction to make sure we can empower as many people with the education and resources needed to pursue your financial freedom. All right. So look, thank you very much for listening to me waffle on for just over an hour now. I hope it has been useful for you guys. Please do give me your thoughts on Griffin AI project. I really like the look of it at the moment. And all of a sudden, the technicals are really looking to back up the fundamentals here. So here's some plans. Let's jump back into this on Monday together. If you're not part of the recovery program, if you are, you get access to me every day. So ask some questions. Let me know your thoughts. And I would say as well at the moment, if we look at things like global liquidity flows, if we look at the kind of market risk on sentiment that's present, as well as a few other factors, heading into 2026, the fact that we got the US coming out of QT, quantitative tightening, moving into almost, quantitative easing type, especially with the debt buyback that they've got next year, I think that we do start to see some resurgence back here. Now, obviously, if that flows into crypto is a different question, but we've got our plans. This is where the technicals really do start to help here, understanding your levels and key points that you want to be involved. Do come and follow me over on Twitter at BC_Richfield. You can find all the information from here and everything you need to know about the Birb Nest as well, and how you can get involved in the 30-day recovery program. Apart from that, wishing you all a fantastic week ahead. Do keep an eye on that government shutdown, see if we do get the PPI and CPI prints or any job data towards the end of the week. At the moment, it's tentative. Some of the aggregator sites have even removed it at the moment, so it's going to be interesting development. But ultimately, any major data releases at the moment are probably going to be slightly more impactful than before because we've been starved of them for so long. Have a fantastic week, everyone. Trade safe, be good to one another, and I look forward to seeing you all around the nest.